Welcome back. I'm playing Warhammer 40,000 Battlesector, and today I'm going to go through my recommended changes for the Orks. If you've been watching my videos for quite some time, you've probably heard some of these recommended changes before, but people have been asking me to break these down into their own faction videos just for a little bit of ease of trying to find my thoughts on different units, because in the past I've just kind of made a smorgasbord of multiple recommended changes and had them all kind of grouped together in a couple of different videos. And as I've been going back through and watching the old unit review videos to get some time codes as people have been requesting, it's kind of changed my thoughts on some of the units. And then over time there has been a lot of reworks to several units that's kind of given some changes as well to the gameplay that will affect my recommended changes as well. And certainly if you guys have thoughts about changes that I don't discuss, please comment below. We'll have a kind of all of these recommendations consolidated into one spot. Who knows, maybe somebody from Slytherin may even eventually see these, and maybe we'll make some of these changes. I know they do have a Discord channel, whatever you would call it, Discord server? I don't know, I don't use Discord, so I'm not quite sure how what the right terminology of it would be for their if you have recommended changes or bug reports, but I have not found them to be super responsive and make changes as people have been deploying them on there. So I'm just kind of creating my own thing, and I'm also kind of curious to know what your guys' thoughts are overall. So with that, I'm actually pretty happy for the most part with where a lot of the Orks are. I think they actually really nailed a lot of the reworks that they've done with the Orks and made them a pretty competitive force. At least that's true for the range build, because with how they have it set up now, they effectively want the Orks to be played as a ranged faction. But when they really buffed up the ranged units, they also nerfed the melee. So one of the changes I would like to see is for the melee builds to be much more viable and much more enjoyable, because right now they really expect you to just do a ranged build, and the Orks are fine as a ranged faction. But again, I really want to see, I like to have lots of versatility. And so if you made a very attractive melee build viable option, then people would be doing that. So you'd have to guess, well, am I going to be playing against a melee army, or am I going to be playing against a range build, or am I going to be playing against a hybrid? Because in the past, before the patches were done, I would find that a lot of players actually would do kind of a hybrid, because they'd either have to decide, am I going to do like a big death ball build where you have all your elite tier units with a bunch of HQ buffs going around them, making them super hard to kill, but then also they would have limited mobility, whereas now it's like, oh, they're just going to create practically an all ranged force, given that all the command point abilities and things like that can really just buff the ranged units to oblivion, and it really doesn't make sense to bring a significant melee force other than a few units to just hold the line. But given that background here, I'll kind of give my two thoughts about things that I wish would change for the Orks. The first one, which I think is going to be pretty much universal, everybody wants this change, but yet it has not been enacted yet, is to fix the function of the Dread mob. Because how this works is you effectively, to get it activated, you need to keep your Deff Dreads within 2 squares, 2 tiles of each other. And if you're having 3, which is how you would get the full Dread mob squads, then you'd be like moving 1 or 2 squares at a time, then select the next Deff Dread, have them move, and then have the next one move. And you have to make sure you're keeping them with cohesion, because if you lose the cohesion, then you're going to lose one of those movement points, which means that you may end up accidentally using up your action point, because if you break cohesion when they're moving and they'll move the full distance, then you may end up in that ending location, and then it's like, oh, well, you broke cohesion during your massive movement here because you didn't break it down into 2 tile movements at a time, and therefore you lost your action point. And now you're like, well, shit, now not only do I not get my massive melee attack, which is amazing with the Deff Dread, but I don't get the increased melee damage or the 20% shots, and you may end up getting yourself overextended with the Deff Dreads because you broke the cohesion accidentally, and that just feels terrible. So what my recommended change would be is to set it up kind of like the battle line doctrine. You know, as long as you end the turn within 2 tiles of your other Deff Dreads, then the following turn they still have the Dread Mob stacks applied to them. And if you want to separate them to start going to fight in different directions, then that turn they'll have the Dread Mobs stacks on them to be used that turn, and then the following turn, if there's not other Deff Dreads by, then they don't have the stacks. But the fact that you need to continuously keep them in cohesion to keep that Dread Mob just leads to unnecessary frustration, micro movements, just a big annoyance. So please fix this. You clearly have the coding to be able to do that with your other abilities, including the battle line doctrines. So just freaking fix this. People have been asking about this to be changed since the Orks were originally released. Just make this a quality of life change, and please freaking fix this and change it so you don't need to stay in continual cohesion, because it's just not a fun mechanic. The other thing, going back to what I was just kind of hinting at the start of this video, is I really think there needs to be some changes to the melee. That way a melee build would be more functional. And I think one of the ways to potentially make that happen is to change the faction trait so you're not getting such low bonus momentum when you're fighting in melee, because currently what it is I think you get 1 bonus momentum per kill in melee and you get 3 bonus momentum for range kills. So either you can double it in melee and maybe bring it up to 2 bonus momentum in melee, and then since they clearly want to have a push to keep it at range, maybe do the 3 for the range. But given that, it shouldn't be a balancing issue, because you're still getting the mob rule momentum gains for your ranged units here, and they're still getting more momentum than your melee kills are. So maybe by just doubling that momentum gain for the melee would make it easier, because what I find is it's a little bit challenging to get all your melee guys to be able to get enough momentum to be able to surge, whereas most of your range guys are going to be close enough together that you're still going to be getting the maximum amount of mob rule stacks to get you up to that 30% momentum, I think is where it maxes out. I don't think it's 20, I think it's 30 if I remember correctly. And so that would just help your melee forces here. So I think by making a little tweak to that faction trait here would make the momentum builds be a little bit better. And kind of going along with that, this Warboss ability, it's actually the boss is watching, and so this confuses a lot of people, because it's like you see that icon there, but that's not necessarily the icon that gets applied to the bonuses to your units. But since they now want you to have more of a range build, they've buffed up his Shuda ability here, so now he's amazing at that, and he has this really nice combi rocket attack. So you're going to tend to keep the Warboss back with your ranged units, but then you're not getting the Warboss as watching buffs going to your melee units. So what I'd like to see for this is there's a couple of ways. Is one, either double the range of the effect, so that way even when he's shooting from a little bit in the back here, using your Shudas here, you'll still be applying your buffs to your melee units, or you effectively just make it a mission-wide buff and you don't have as range on it, and if you have a Warboss on the screen, then the rest of your melee units will get the benefit of this. But then in exchange, you need to make it so it doesn't stack. So if you have, because currently what happens if you have 2 Warbosses, you'll have 20 melee accuracy, 30 melee damage if they're both within range. But if you're going to make it a, map wide buff, I don't think you can go up that much. If you did, that would certainly make a melee build totally viable, and I don't think you need to change anything else, because then melee would be absolutely amazing, but I think that would probably be pushing it too far the other direction. So I think just doubling the range of this ability will allow you to get the best of both worlds, where you kind of want to have the Warboss be close to buff your melee, but then also somewhat far away so he's still using his range attacks. So that's my 2 cents there. I think that would really help the melee faction here be more viable. Likewise, kind of going around with that, they really nerfed the Nobz pretty heavily with the changes. I'm a little bit frustrated with what they did. So it's like if you have your standard Choppa, you actually have a little bit of splash damage. But once you get to pay more for your higher damage units, equipment, I should say, you no longer have splash damage, and that just feels terrible. So what I'd like to see is reduce the cost of the Big Choppa to 10 from 15, and then have them keep their splash damage being the same, so that becomes a little more viable. And then once you get up to the power claws, either give them ×1 splash, and if it's significant splash damage, you keep it at 20 cost, or you keep it, you know, double the splash here, so, you know, 4 to 8 times 1, or even a lower amount ×2 splash, being, you know, 2 units get hit by the splash instead of 1, and then keep it at 20 cost, and that will make it more enjoyable, because in the past the power claw had splash, and then even if one of your units missed an attack, which is unlikely to happen, and even if it does, you'll still be able to kill weak tier units, and that splash will also be enough to allow these guys to chop through low tier infantry, because it just feels weird that Nobz with these massive claws that they're just scything through your opponent here as they're swinging can't chop through low tier infantry. It just feels like a stupid mechanic. So definitely bring back the splash damage to the power claw. Now I understand why they did that. They wanted to really increase the differentiation between your Meganobz with their ×4 splash with their kill saws, and make them more viable, because most people were just bypassing the Meganobz and going for the Nobz, because they would have more HP that you'd have to shoot through. They'd be getting more bonus HP because, you know, the Sawbones ability here. Sorry, no, it's the Dock is in ability giving you the 15% bonus HP. You know, the Nobz just were totally way better than the Meganobz, which were 30 points more than the fully kitted out regular Nobz with the power claw. So I get why they try to nerf it, but they just put it in a bad spot. So what I would say is bring back the splash, maybe make some changes to the costs here a little bit, and then make it a much more enjoyable experience, and then maybe slightly increase the health for the Meganobz so they become even more powerful. Or you can just give them a little bit of a damage mitigation ability, kind of like how the Storm Shield gives you -10% damage. Maybe you just give the Meganobz an ability where they suffer -10% damage or something like that, because these are effectively supposed to be the Ork Terminators, and then, you know, they're just going to be absolute brick shit houses otherwise. Or like I said, you just increase their health a little bit more, and because they already feel very good, but it's just a little hard to get them into combat with that 3 movement to usually snipe them down. And then if they have anything that's a real good armor piercing ability, you know, Vanquisher Cannon, something like that, just they'll kill one of the models, and then that drops the damage of the squad by 33% instead of 20% when you're losing a knob here. And then obviously, because you can heal, you know, HP for every squad unit here compared to only 3 models here, it just makes the Nobz still feel like they're more tanky than the Meganobz. So it's kind of a weird situation, but you definitely shouldn't punish the Nobz and make them a well, they're still viable, but it's just not as viable as they used to be. So I think if you make some minor tweaks that way, that will significantly improve the efficiency of a melee build. The only other thing I would recommend is one of the changes that I think they really kind of shit the bed on is the missiles. They felt like the Orks didn't have enough anti-vehicle, and so they made everything anti-vehicle. You know, they really made amazing changes to the Beamy Def Gun, and that was amazing. So now it's a viable option, and it is actually a must-take, at least one on most matchups here. But what they need to do is maybe make some slight changes to how the rocket launchers work, and I'm not quite sure the best way to do this, so I'd be curious what your guys' thoughts are. But I think either make it so the rocket launchers have more splash, so maybe do it ×2 splash, or make it so the splash damage is a little bit more because they're shooting, you know, these 2 explosive rockets, and so that way it becomes still a good anti-infantry killer in addition to a anti-vehicle killer. And then because you're attacking a single vehicle, if you're using the splash damage, it won't really affect the vehicle that much. And then just add that splash damage to the combi rockets as well. That way it becomes a little more of a better option, because the fact that you have a reload time with your rockets, you need to make the rockets really good, because effectively you're going to make it so they can only attack every other turn with that rocket attack. So you need to make it be, you know, 2 turns worth of attacks. And so adding a bunch of splash damage, kind of like what they did with the Deffkopter, because that rocket has 4 splash damage and high damage output, whereas the combi rockets and the rocket launcher just doesn't seem to be able to do that. Now I understand, again, they don't want to make the boys hit too above their pay grade, because if you throw in that get stuck in and these rockets, these guys can do surprising amounts of damage, but you need to do something to make them a little more viable if you're going to keep that reload time. The other option is you just get rid of the reload mechanic, and then it's a non-issue, and ideally I think that's probably what I'd like to see, because no other weapon in this game has a reload mechanic. So honestly, I would not be terribly upset if they just removed it, and in which case I wouldn't change anything. I'd just keep them the way they are. But by having that reload mechanic, it just feels like a stupid situation. I think everybody knows about this and has been requesting it to be fixed since the game was released, but the Warbike and the Deffkopter both have audio bugs. So with the Warbike, when you use the cloud of smoke, you'll hear them continually screeching in the background and making that noise, and it's super loud, it's super obnoxious, so please fix that. Likewise with the Deffkopter, you can sometimes hear them, their flying mechanic going off continuously in the background until they get killed, and that is equally annoying. So if they can fix those 2 audio bugs, I think that would be great and make things much better. And then my other thought is with the Painboy is either, there's a couple of things I think you could do. Is one, you should make it so their healing ability also removes poison and status effects, so that way they're in line with the other healers in the game. The other thing that I think could be kind of interesting, and let me know if your guys' thoughts on this, but what I'd like to see is if the Sawbones does not get the heal off, that it does slightly more damage, so maybe increases the damage to, you know, 20 to 25 damage per model, something like that, or 15 to 25 damage to the one model. But if that goes off, then it causes like an enraged ability, which will give them like plus 10% damage, or, you know, plus 15 if it's 10 range, 15 melee, something like that. So that way you don't feel like you not only injured one of your units and potentially even killed one of the models dropping the damage, and you wasted your Painboy's action. That way there would be a buff that is applied to the unit to kind of counteract those penalties here. I do like kind of the RNG about the Pain Doc maybe not actually healing the unit. That seems very lore accurate. It's kind of fun, but I would like to see some sort of buff be applied that would help negate some of those negative penalties to make it more worthwhile. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are. But I always thought that would be kind of a fun mechanic to be applied in exchange for the damage. Now, the last unit that I would like to see changed is the Deffkilla Wartrike. I have played several matches with this guy, and I just don't feel like he's worth it for the most part. And so, well, it's cool that we kind of have him, and he was brought out of the Deeds of the Fallen. He just doesn't feel like he's in a good spot. So I think there's several things that you could potentially do to make him more viable. One, the biggest issue is, you know, he costs 20 points more than your Warboss. The Warboss is buffing up everybody. He's got an amazing AoE attack. He's got an amazing kill shot. And he's one of the best melee fighters in the game, okay? This guy does none of those things, and he still costs 20 points. Now they're saying, well, you got 5 movement because he's like a harasser. Fine, but he's also easy to snipe down. And so for you to get 225 points at his current setup, that's not viable. So potential solutions here: significantly increases HP, so that way he's more tanky, since he's effectively a Warboss on the back of a Warbike. So increase his HP so he can take more shots, because in the way he is now, you're trying to get him into melee so you can use his melee attack and his flamer, or you're pretty close at a range of 2 with the boomsticks here. So he's got to be fairly close to the combat. So increase the HP. Other option, increase the evasion further so he's really hard to hit, kind of make him like the Gene Stealer Lord. But that can be pretty frustrating, I think, for factions to have to kill him, so that may not be the best option. But I do think at a minimum increasing his HP, or you decrease his cost to make him more in line with the Warboss, may be a better option. Likewise, I think you need to I would get rid of the charge time for the speed boss. That way you can spam this ability a little bit more and help your guys move around to get into combat quicker. You could also potentially change the speed boss to a 2-turn cooldown from a 3-turn cooldown. I think all those kind of things would help make them a little bit worth the cost. And you should probably... this is tough. I think you should give them more splash, so like splash ×2, but then you probably have to reduce the amount of splash damage that he does, because ×2 at 57 to 77 is too damn powerful. So maybe splash ×2 with a reduced damage, or I guess you can keep it splash ×1, but then again he's going to really struggle killing most other units. So I'd traditionally like to see just more units hit with splash with slightly less splash damage, but I'm not totally sure the best way to do that. But I do think kind of helping the speed boss ability would help. So I think if you do some sort of change within those recommendations, that'll make them much more worthwhile, or you just decrease the cost, I suppose, would be the easier solution here. But I think with those minor tweaks here, that's what I would recommend for the Orks. Otherwise, I think they feel real good. I mean, it's one of the few factions where I see most of the units used, which is definitely fun because it just leads to a lot of versatile play styles here. Perhaps you can make an argument for a slight increase to the armor piercing to the big bomb, but even that I don't think needs to happen, because the Deffkopter still feels like it can pay for itself with doing some hit and run unit attacks and things like that. So those are my thoughts with the Orks. Like I said, overall I'm very happy with how they play now. They did eventually fix the bug where the warpath and the boss's watching would not stack on each other correctly, so sometimes I still get questions from players about whether that's still a thing. That has been patched out per my understanding, because I have not seen that bug with several matches with both the Warboss and the Weird Boy. So as far as I'm aware, that has been patched out, so that feels good. Otherwise, I'm very happy with the changes they made for the Orks. And if there's other thoughts, you guys have other recommendations for unit changes, you disagree with some of the recommendations I have, comment below. That way everything can kind of be in one area for each faction as you guys are requesting. And like I said, even though I give several different recommendations for multiple units and faction traits and things like this, I don't expect them to carry out all these potential changes. I just give some ideas. I think if they enacted every recommendation I had for every faction, I think it would probably either nerf or buff something too much. But knowing that, I'm just giving several potential options to make things a little more I would say viable, and try to make every unit a very attractive candidate for matchups. That way you never can completely predict what your opponents are bringing, because that's one of the things I'm finding is there's certain builds that just work so much better than others that it just leads to a lack of variety in the matches, and that's what causes people to get fatigued and burned out on games. Is if you know, oh, these people are going to be doing a jump pack build, oh, this is an Orks, it's just going to do a pure range build. That's not fun if you're always playing the same builds. So this, I think, will lead to more versatility. So with that, I'm going to sign off for the day. I hope you're enjoying these videos. If you are, please give my channel a like and subscribe, because we post more content for you. Have a great day.